This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good morning this morning. Today is Wednesday, March 15th, and this is On the Clock. On the Clock with Erin Greene. On the Clock, we engage in organizations, institutions, social and cultural leaders, and ordinary people to better understand the impact of public policy, private sector development, and emerging social and consumer trends. On the Clock, we have conversations that help us understand and navigate a rapidly changing Bahamas. And of course, I have Erin Greene, who's on Zoom, and she's going to be joining in. But we have breaking news. We have a former cabinet minister, former MP, according to police reports, is going to be charged in the court shortly. And that is where all the media is at right now. Everybody is talking about that and blogging. And we are waiting to see what will be the protocol. Will they return to the spectacle of having people walk downtown because of this particular incident? Or will they continue with the policy that was implemented by the Minister of National Security that it should not be a spectacle? But I'll bring on Erin topics. We're talking land today. We're talking private development, and we will have a discussion on that. But of course, before we start that, Erin has some housekeeping that she needs to do, but we need to just have a preamble, a brief discussion on what should be anticipated on Bay Street proper today, on Parliament Street. Erin, are you there?
Good morning. Good morning, Cecil. Good morning, Bahamas.
And Erin,
good morning to the Guardian Radio audience.
And my question
glad to be here again across the Zoom room. That is some news, Mr. Nuri. And this question of the changing policy for would be what is affectionately called in the U.S. the perp walk, right? It already has a negative connotation that tends to bias those that have to make the walk. But I think it's a fascinating question, one that we should engage, because for me it links back to our prior conversation about privacy and anonymity.
But Erin,
right?
Shouldn't we expect, since he's a politician, shouldn't we expect the public to see what is happening? That this perp walk, this parliamentary shuffle, as we in Bahamas call it, is necessary for justice?
Well, when we look at when we adhere to the principle that justice must not just be done, it must be seen to be done, right? I say, for high-profile individuals, particularly those that would have been members of the House of Parliament, there is required a degree of visibility, right, to ensure that justice is not just done, that justice is done. And that degree of visibility is not just for us, it's also for those who have been accused, right? That we see them, that we know it's them, that we're certain that they're still alive. While this particular matter doesn't warrant that level of concern necessarily, these are important principles.
This is the recent years that we have parliamentarians, former parliamentarians, charged before the courts, right? I have a vision of a D. Sheen Gibson having handcuffs and shackled, right? And he had a leg injury, and having him walk that long walk to the courtroom, and that vision of him being in somewhat pain and agony and saying, this is an honorable gentleman, this is an honorable man who served the Bahamas. And I said, this went too far. Certain decorum, certain leisures should be afforded to persons who serve in the honorable house. So that's what I thought at the time.
No, man, I think in this instance, people who serve before the House have no privilege outside of the privilege that the ordinary man has, right? There's nothing special that they are warranted or that they deserve because of the fact that they are politicians. No, they must be treated in the same manner that the ordinary man is treated, right? And that's why it's important for overt reforms in the justice system, in the judicial system, because there shall be no special treatment for anyone. Everybody gets the same thing, right? And that should apply across the board to education, to healthcare, right? And in the same way as it applies to the judicial system.
You mentioned
But,
overt
you know,
reforms. You mentioned overt reforms. The Minister of National Security wanted reforms and said that this is what is happening now. This spectacle is anti. What's the right word for that, Erin? Anti-justice or jurisprudence in terms of it prejudice the general public and prejudice the potential jurors. And I'm thinking of that, and it's a reason why he brought that up. And I'm saying that I hear you saying that justice must be seen, right? But with that in the backdrop, right, the responsibility and the new policies he's trying to bring in to modernize the Bahamas in terms of social thinking, right? Shouldn't that be the pinnacle that we
now,
aspire to do?
if you had said to me you were referencing his statements and concerns about the prison, the state of the judiciary, and that improving the prison facilities will also include providing a perhaps a teleconferencing facility, right, where people don't have to leave the prison facility to appear before a judge. I thought you were gonna reference instances like that, but I think no. This thing that we call the perp walk is prejudiced by us, not the thing itself. And I think that this is important, particularly with the continued claims of police brutality.
Okay, I want
Right?
to read the press release itself, right? And I want you commenting on it. It says, arraignment update. Police wish to advise the public that Mrs. Lanisha Roll along will be arraigned on Wednesday, March 15th, 2023 at 10 a.m. before Magistrates Court, New Providence, reference to 17 matters related to fraud. And they have Christine Skippins, et cetera, March 15th.
Yes.
What my concern, what I want to ask you or bait you on is 4 others. Why not just list the names of the 4 others? Why single her out in this press release? And why is there a need for a press release? What is the agenda? What they're trying to put forward? I assume this press release is for us, not the media.
But
so why? Go ahead.
Because justice must be done, and not justice must not just be done. It must be seen to be done, right? And so you make it public that this is happening. Mrs. Roll is a high-profile person. I'd go as far as to say politically exposed. We don't know if the 4 others are civil servants, if they're private citizens. We don't know any of that yet. But Ms. Roll is a politically exposed person, and that is why it has been made public. And at the same time, we must balance. We must determine whether there's a balance here, right? Like I said, like you say, you're concerned about people being prejudiced. I think that the process at that point is fine. I think what prejudices people or creates bias is the lack of action post this moment, right? Post the perp walk, post the wanted poster, where the police force, the AG's office, the Department of Public Prosecution, but whichever body is responsible does not post an equally overt statement indicating that the person has been cleared, the person is no longer of interest, the person has been processed, the person has been charged, right? These are the things that create an environment where bias and prejudice can set in if they are not properly done. Is the perp walk itself. I think the problem is both the professional and the social cultures or environments in which the perp walk takes place.
Yes.
But
Go ahead.
in this particular instance, Mr. Newry, given a statement brought to the public by the Assistant Commissioner of Police, indicating that rumors on social media about a charge of a serious nature brought against Ms. Roll, brought by Ms. Roll against a former prime minister is false, right? After those statements were made, I would say, not only do I want to see Mrs. Roll, I want to hear from Mrs. Roll. And unfortunately, because of rumors or misstatements or unclear statements that were made on social media, we now have an instance involving high-profile people that must be clarified. And so, in this instance, I want to hear from her, I want to see her, and I don't think we can suffice with, well, this is a private matter. This is a politically exposed person, and justice must not just be done, it must be seen to be done.
But Erin, as you know, when this is before the courts, more than likely she will have to fall silent in order to have a best defense. But we know that she has been called in. When I say she, Mrs. Roll, Anisha Roll, former MP and former minister inside the last administration, the Effingham administration. We know that she was brought in for questioning on several occasions. On each one of those occasions she was brought in, a press release by the police was issued out to say that she, and along with her husband at one or two times, has been brought in for questioning and then subsequently released. I haven't seen that done to anyone else. It was like a constant reminder. Oh, by the way, I guess what you said, justice must be seem to be seen to be done. Is that was the reason you think? And then my second question I want to ask you and bait you again. Should women's group, seeing all of the machinery, mechanism, forgive me for pronouncing this wrongly, seeing what is happening, should they be concerned and as a woman having justice? You see, again, you mentioned reference false news in the media, making things salacious, right? Should women's group be concerned that she is being targeted because she is female?
Women's groups should be concerned because this is a politically exposed, high-profile woman being brought before the courts. We should always be concerned. We should always keep our eyes open to ensure that justice is fairly, that the law is fairly applied, right? Given the nature of statements made in social media, unverified, right? Unverified statements made in social media. I, as a women's rights advocate, I'm keeping my ears open, I'm keeping my eyes open, and I'm not just waiting for something to happen. I'm alert and want to be aware if something happens. I'm keeping my eye on it. I wish that Mrs. Roll herself would speak and bring some clarity to the matter, but here we are, and all we can do is attempt to balance, right? Balance the sort of rights to privacy and anonymity with the principles that justice must not just be done, but seen to be done, and the principles of good governance, right? We got to balance all of these things and just be prepared to stand up if necessary in defense of those that need defense.
You mentioned prepared to stand up in defense of those who may need defense. I come from a background of advocacy, American-oriented in college, right, where women's group were loud. Women's group were obvious and blatant, right? And they weren't selective in terms of their defense and say this is not right and go forward with that. I see that you mentioned that you standing and watching. I know that you're an advocate and I know that you will speak, you use your platform, but there are a number of other women's group, and I brought this to your attention on your show before, that are strangely silent. And I know they might be working in the background. They might be swans gliding their feet to be paddling underneath the water. But shouldn't they be vocal explaining that I understand these things are happening. However, as a women's advocacy group, we are highlighting concerns that we see that will impact all women. Therefore, we put in the powers that be on alert that these things must be addressed or look at in order to protect women in general. That does not seem to be happening as a whole or across the board into the Bahamas. It seems as women are always fragile and victims, and then when the crisis happens, there's a response.
Just sort of to respond to that, I'd say that from a different jurisdiction would produce different routes or results. I don't think that the sort of advocacy culture here takes the same approach, maybe an advocacy culture in the US, where, like you say, women's groups would have gotten up and said, listen, we know that the former cabinet minister and MP has been embroiled in issues before. We know that it's not unreasonable that she may be brought before the courts, but that doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to ensure that this former cabinet minister and former MP, who is also a woman, who is also female, we are standing, and we want you to know, we're putting you on alert. Mm-hmm. We are here to ensure that the law is applied fairly. We are here to ensure that she is processed with no bias, no prejudice, right? That's an advocacy from a different advocacy culture. To be honest with you, expect that type of advocacy from the women's rights organizations working today. Most of the organizations don't mind that they have the word advocacy in their name or in their mission statement. Most of these organizations are really support organizations and don't actually engage in rigorous advocacy or lobbying work, right? The second is that the organizations that are focused on women's participation in politics, I don't think that they are prepared in the sense that they don't necessarily have the capacity, the training, right, the resources and the technical skills to engage in these types of issues or advocacy of this nature, right? I think that many of them are very new. They are in the infancy in terms of political advocacy, and they are establishing themselves and the philosophy upon which their organizations operate.
If that is true, I am deathly concerned, and I'm very much concerned. But you mentioned Lanisha's voice, or the lack thereof, regarding the rumors that were circling over social media for about a week or two ago, and it involved a high-ranking political host. The former prime minister's name was called, her name was called, and of course the authorities, the police, came and say that is utterly false. No such thing was ever reported to police.
Well, that's not necessarily what they said. What they said was no formal complaint. No complaint was made.
Okay, and going with that,
yeah.
One would assume that the slander, or no, let me take that word back from slander, right? What was said was so egregious, right, that the police would have been duty bound to say where that originated. They have no other choice but to investigate. But then again, perhaps someone needed to complain, and you say the lack of voice. I'm concerned that the official complaint that we know of that was made to say, hey, something went awry and we will not tolerate this moving forward, because it looks like this will happen again.
Right, a complaint of slander, a complaint of libel, defamation of character. Because of the status of the people involved, I expected a statement by those involved outside of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Now, mind you, the Royal Bahamas Police Force spoke to what is in their purview. No report was made, right? I think the matter is of such a high profile that we should have statements from those involved indicating that this is just false, it is just slander, it is just rumor, but we will not prosecute the person or the organization it arose from. Right? I think the matter is too serious to not address it.
Too serious to not address it. At the same time, it will the psyche of us, right? It's right now.
And
go ahead.
While people may think that this is just sort of trite rumor making that we can ignore, that it is trite rumor making is why we cannot ignore it. Right? And we must set a precedent to ensure that we have a balanced and proper, a legally proper way of dealing with instances like these going forward.
It is now 10:33. We're going to take our first break so we can transition to the agenda that Erin has set forward. But this has been On the Clock with Erin Greene, and I'm C.A. Nuri, and we will be right back.
September.
Bendy, what on earth are you doing now with all those red X's on the calendar?
I verified in person for my NIB pension today, so I'm crossing out all the months until I have to verify again.
Oh, yeah. By law, we are required to verify twice a year, in our birth months and then again 6 months later. It's important so we can continue to receive our benefit payments.
Yes, the friendly lady at NIB reminded me that the verification forms are available online at select retail locations and that you don't even have to verify in person. Once a sanctioned authority certifies your form, it can be emailed to verification@nib-bahamas.com or placed in the Dropbox at any NIB location.
NIB is making everything so convenient. The verification process is simple, and it's all outlined on NIB's website and social media pages. At NIB, they're making it easier for you.
Love the show? Want to give your support? Become a sponsor today. Call 302-2300 for our rates and packages. That's 302-2300. Become a sponsor on Guardian 0.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
The new Guardian Radio app is here. Listen live to all our Guardian Radio shows and live video stream select programs in our studio. Get information about Guardian Radio shows and our hosts. Send messages including text, email, and even call. All from our amazing new Guardian Radio app. Download it free today in your App Store for your Apple device or Play Store for your Android device. The all-new and improved Guardian Radio app.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day.
And welcome back to On the Clock with Erin Greene. This is C.A. Nuri, who's in studio while Erin Greene is out sick via Zoom. And of course, according to her show, she has a lot of housekeeping that she got to do. So I'll allow her to do her housekeeping now so we can transition to our... Go ahead, Erin.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Nuri, and good morning, Bahamas. I'm glad to be back after that short commercial break. So like the little quick house, I just wanted to point people in the direction of a letter to the editor in today's Nassau Guardian by Siobhan Hollis, child advocate and president of Save Our Children Alliance. It's a very a good and important read, given the increase in sexual violence as indicated in the papers, right, in the reporting, sexual violence against young people, and a number of stories that would suggest that we are not taking our duty of care for young people seriously, and we are not taking our professional requirements and standards in terms of how we are expected to interact with children seriously. And so I just wanted to point people to that letter to the editor before we get into today's discussion. Mr. Nuri, I saw in today's Guardian headline, economist touts IMF program to solve Bahamas' debt.
I did see that too.
And I am sort of startled by it. And I wanted to talk about it briefly in connection to two articles in our local papers. And so in response to commentary by noted Caribbean economist Marla Duckeran on the value of the Bahamas entering a debt restructuring program through the IMF and employing the services of other multilateral organizations like the World Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, and Inter-American Development Bank to get the country's debt under control. My response is this. First of all, the Bahamian government owes all of that money, and not me, and technically not anybody I know personally. We don't owe the money. The Bahamian government owes the money. And thus, the second response is no. The answer is no. We don't need an IMF restructuring program. We don't need to work in conjunction with all of these other organizations. All we need is very simple, is a whole lot of professional discipline and personal integrity. That is all that we need. And I'm going to go into that in these other two articles because secondarily, not only do we need professional discipline and personal integrity individually and collectively in governance and socially, right? These programs that the IMF, the IDB, the World Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, these programs are meaningless without substantive structural and infrastructural reform at the global level. The systems, legal, economic, social, the systems, political, that we operate under today are the same system that created the problem that the environment we are operating in. They mean nothing but a death sentence unless there is a commitment by the global economic community and global political community to reform global economic, political, and legal infrastructure. And it's as simple as that. I do hope that we are having meaningful dialogue and discourse on this issue outside of the realm of politics, because the political imagination does not have the capacity to even acknowledge the extent, the width, and the breadth of the issue. They are limited by the parameters of their own making. And so it is important for us Bahamians, as important as it is for us to figure out where we're all going to live and where we all going to live and how we all going to eat. This conversation is equally important. We have to take it out of the hands of the politicians. And unfortunately, we have to take it out of the hands of the technocrats that are, whether intentionally or unintentionally, directly or indirectly connected to the political class and the political machinery. Now, the two articles, Mr. Nuri, I was looking at yesterday were, the first is Last Peaceful Settlement Fares Over 163 Unit Project, and that was in the Nassau Tribune this week or last week. And then an article from February, from last month, February the 6th, 2023, entitled Albany Owns It Now, Okay. I want to start with the first article, Last Peaceful Settlements Fares Over 163 Unit Project. This is in the Adelaide residents yesterday voiced fears that a proposed 163 unit multifamily residential project will destroy the last peaceful settlement we have in New Providence if approved by government regulators. Rudy Stewart, an Adelaide Beach Drive resident, pledged to Tribune Business that we're going to fight against it after the Department of Physical Planning unveiled plans for a March 30th, 2023 consultation on a proposed 20.46 acre project by Adelaide Development Holding Limited. Documents lodged with the department confirmed the development would lie adjacent to and in very close proximity to the main Adelaide village in southwestern New Providence if it receives site plan approval from the Town Planning Committee. Mr. Pericles Melis, conservationalist, and whose property sits at the western boundary proposed development, declined to comment when contacted by Tribune Business, indicating that he was still assessing the development's implications for himself, Adelaide, and the area's wider community. Now, Mr. Nuri, this story struck me as an important story, but let me tell you why. Because the 20.46 acre project by Adelaide Development Holding Limited is not the Adelaide Pines project that we have been talking about, or that I've been talking about over the last few months.
Interesting.
This is a second or secondary project in Adelaide that's on the table. And the first project, Adelaide Pines, has already been approved, I think, by the Town Planning Committee at that level. And so this story was important to me because I thought, hold on, what could possibly be happening? How is it that this is the second major development being proposed for that very tiny space called Adelaide Village, and we have not yet had a substantive statement from the government on its vision for that southwestern portion of New Providence, for development in that area, for land management in that area? I mean, there's nothing that suggests that these developments are being proposed after the government has indicated that it has a vision and a policy, a plan, a view for developing that portion of the island in a particular way. It suggests...
Erin, I want to just step in right there. What was the government's vision? I don't think our government have a vision for any area. I don't necessarily think we have a vision for even Bay Street. Bay Street is helter-skelter, and hopefully we have investors who will spend their money independent of the government and make it happen. Nothing is planned. And I hear you suggesting that Adelaide should be planned. But the development down there isn't planned by government. It's planned by foreign investors or investors in general.
But see, now this is my issue, right? I could understand why an economist like Ms. Duckerin, I could understand why she would be so concerned. But with even peripheral interrogation, we could see that we've not reached the level of requiring that supervision or programming, that our issues are very simple. And it's about a lack of discipline and preparedness. For instance, right? I have to ask the question, who or what is Adelaide Development Holding Limited? When I go online to search for the company, the only thing that comes up is what appears to be a very well-established company in Australia, right? And when you read the article, Last Peaceful Settlement Spares Over 163 Unit Project, it says Braun Limited, in a February 15, 2023 letter on the developer's behalf, right, wrote to one of the relevant agencies about the proposal. And my question is not just why is an associate principal with Braun Limited acting on behalf of the developers. But how is it that a company that on a peripheral search you can find no information about, how are they able to secure a site plan approval hearing before the town planning committee for February 28th for it to be postponed for March 30th? Right? And so I just want to take a moment to point out that we don't have to panic and divert immediately to an IMF program to solve Bahamas' debt. We just need to get serious about the principles that we campaign on and that we tout about and tighten up the ship. There's another story I wanted to mention. The title is okay, right? And it reads, a controversial Austrian is moving to draw Albany's principal investor into a multi-million-dollar legal battle over his rival bid to acquire the neighboring South Ocean Resort property. Dr. Mirko Kovacs, a life-at-key homeowner with permanent residence status in the Bahamas since 2017, has gained a U.S. judge's approval to serve subpoenas on the Tavistock Group in a bid to uncover any communications with the government over his own South Ocean development plans. Now, currently, the South Ocean property, one of New Providence's last remaining large-scale resort parcels, is currently owned by the Canadian Commercial Workers Industry Pension Plan. And I'm thinking, well, how did this happen? How was it possible? And how is it that comes in place to protect our sovereignty and the integrity of the Bahamian territory? Why don't we have mechanisms in place to allow us to step in and purchase the land to protect it or to save it or to preserve it for Bahamian use or to protect it from unsavory use or from being owned by anonymous people? And I would suggest, after sitting and thinking for 3 minutes, that we could easily take that property. We could we could create an affordable housing and temporary and emergency housing complex.
Erin.
We could turn it into a heritage tourism village and tourism and sustainability training center.
Erin.
We could even make it the site of the new hospital.
But Erin, no, it can't be too far. But Erin,
Yeah.
one must appreciate that property has the last license for a casino. It is zoned. It is zoned to be a high-end resort. I hear what you suggest that it could be replaced in, but this is some expensive property, right? It's a casino-oriented property. It had one of the best golf courses in the Bahamas at one point in time. Property that has to be used has is a strong word, but my concern is I hear you what you're lamenting about it. My concern is it should not be owned by, forgive me for this, by the established entity out there, and I think it should be owned by Albany. It's unfortunate. It would be unfortunate for one entity to own so much of Bahamian land out there, right? The influence that they can have on the government owning so much property and so much commerce. It should be some kind of competition to break up that monopoly. Imagine, we know that persons from Albany can write the Prime Minister now and influence protocol and procedures, stop taxes altogether. So imagine if they get access to more property, all of South Ocean and inclusive of the land they have now, the type of influence they can wield in our politics in general. So I'm more concerned about that, not necessarily private land being sold to other private owners to establish another gated community. I know the gated community will come because that whole area is zoned for gated communities.
Listen, it raises a number of questions for me, and I hope that it raised a number of questions for other people. The first is, are we ready to reenact the Immovable Properties Act or even stricter legislation for land leasing and usage. Okay, I don't think Albany should be allowed to purchase it and develop it for the very same reasons as you. But I also wonder, is it time to become a little discriminatory and create mechanisms that allows the government to do what may be perceived as discrimination by the wider global community, but have very strict or criteria for purchasing land of this size? Right? I think that we need to not just re-implement the Immovable Properties Act, but reinforce it with criteria about who can buy and how big you're allowed to become in a country that you are not a citizen of. It's very concerning. We could be doing something with the land right now. As far as I'm aware, the land is sitting empty, right? It's nobody's
For
doing
decades.
it's not occupied, it's abandoned, right?
Yes, for decades.
For decades. I think doing anything with it is better than doing nothing with it. And we have immediate emergency needs. We have a housing crisis. In fact, the crisis is so large that the president of the Hotel Tourism Association sounded the alarm. We don't have enough beds for tourists. You know it's a crisis now. We have a healthcare crisis. I know it's very far away, but maybe we can create a residential facility for the boarders, the people who are on long-term care. Something needs to work, right? But what we can't have is more of this political rhetoric, right? That does not instill confidence in Bahamian investors nor foreign investors. For instance, if you look at the front of today's paper, it is today's Guardian, and the Prime Minister says, pardon me one second, audience. The Prime Minister says, Davis says he invited Smith to resubmit PI proposal, right? And the quote is, we've heard nothing more about the company that was collecting fees on behalf of a government ministry without being licensed to do so or conduct or engage in financial services. We've heard nothing, not even the name being announced by the Prime Minister of the company. But Toby must reapply? I wanted to ask the Prime Minister, is it your land? Is it your island? Is it your tourism? Is it your economy? Is it your lighthouse? See, if you attempted to convince me that the buck stops with you and you will not just take personal responsibility, but you will take legal responsibility and take on legal liability for the decisions that you and your cabinet and those under your rule as Prime Minister make. If you said that, then I could tell you you have the moral authority to make these decisions. But whose land is it? Whose country is it? Whose vision is it? It is not yours. And so we don't need an IMF program to fix this debt, to right-size the economy. We need a psychological and cultural structural program to balance the vision of the political class.
Erin, I want to interject here. One must see and appreciate that there is a demand. There is a demand for Bahamian land. It's something that's exciting, and people internationally wants to get access to it. And we see that the government is making overtures to have the Crown land be put into a sovereign wealth fund. And we use that in quotes because we don't have a sovereign wealth fund. That has been rescinded. But to monetarize the Bahamian land, that is the economy, in short. Perhaps what is happening now, this demand, this show of interest of international people trying to purchase land, and the government making the access happen. They see the need for development. The economy needs to grow. We know the economy needs to grow.
Stick a pin. I appreciate what you're saying. The value extracted from the land and the territory of the Commonwealth Bahamas is primarily and principally for the Bahamian people, not via the Bahamian government, not through the Bahamian government, and not principally for the Bahamian government. It is for the Bahamian people. The land is not there for the Bahamian government to be able to tax, to afford its trinkets and trivialities. That's not what it's there for. It's for the benefit of the Bahamian people, and the opportunities derived from the land and the attempts are not, these opportunities are not for the benefit of the government and the political parties and its cronies. It is for the benefit and the well-being of the people.
But I have a text here, and I want you to respond to this, right? They said, Erin, they shouldn't let them do the project. Too much land going to foreigners. What will Bahamian have left? But this is private land, Erin, being sold. What does that have to do with the government? If it's already privately owned and it's available to be sold.
The Albany project we're talking about is already privately owned, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if the Adelaide Development Holding Limited project is all privately owned. There's just not enough information available to the public. And from the Tribune article, there doesn't seem to be sufficient information available for the government to have made these decisions.
Yeah.
They're actors and they're agents.
But I just for a point of interest, we are aware that it used to be Crown land and it was so leased to be farmland. And I think that the previous owners, Thompson, according to the article, acquired it. And now he was able to sell it now. I'm not sure how to transition from Crown land to be able to own it and to be able to sell it. But he's now able to sell it now to this private developers. I think that's how
I would love you to cite that article. I didn't read that. I didn't see that settlements fares over 163 unit project. Even if that's the case, Mr. Newman, even if that is the case, we need a land management plan, not just a plan produced by the developer for the specific project, but before the developer could produce a land management plan, they have to juxtapose it towards a larger national and then island-wide and then district and then community management plan, right? Like these things can't just happen in isolation. They have to happen in unison, in cohesion.
Interesting. But it's now 11:01, Erin. I give you out that summary now. Go ahead.
No, man, thank you. Thank you for that.
Go ahead.
I just think that it's important for us to understand that we, the people, can have a position on the economy of the Bahamas. We can engage in public discourse, and we must demand from our professional economists and industry stakeholders that they practice both personal and professional integrity and engage the issue based, outside of the political framework, outside of the political imagination.
That's great. This has been On the Clock with Erin Greene. This is C.A. Nuri, who's in studio as Erin comes in via Zoom because she was fighting with some Chick Chinese and broke her foot.
Listen, that's what the police report says, sir. I do not assent to that. But thank you very much, Mr. Nuri. I've got to go and tend to my foot. I thank you for joining me this morning and have a wonderful time on Guardian Radio AM in the morning.
Good day. Bye-bye.